regarding the Heritage Park project. Jeff was so kind to dust off the old plans from 2016 and help to obviously get some new numbers for the town in order to move this project forward. So without further ado, I'm not sure what your preference is and how to proceed.
Let me just call the meeting to order of the Capital Committee on February 24th at 10:06 a.m. This meeting is being held via a Zoom webinar in accordance with Governor Baker's orders. Members in attendance are Ralph Page, Ryan Quimby, Richard Chero, Connor O'Shea, Steve Lonergan, Jim Broderick, Mary McNally, and guests are Jeff Squire, Bruce Penny, and Donna Prather. So how does the committee feel? Do we want another overview of the plan, or do we want to just start firing questions at Bruce, Jeff, and Donna? Ralph, you're the question man.
I'm always the question man. So I guess part of my thought process with looking at the plan, is this what the rec department, DPW, and all came up with a final plan, or is this to try and get us some basic numbers on what's there? I mean, I'm looking at certain things like the outdoor basketball courts. I've talked to residents in the area. They're not thrilled with having them. I know Donna had mentioned that the rec center that's proposed for there, she'd like to see it larger. I mean, my initial thought was we would look to the Brown Farm to put the splash pad and the outdoor basketball courts, which would be more centralized in the middle of town, which would open up more area within Heritage Park. So I'm not sure. It's been quite a while since I went to the rec committee meeting where they voted. I believe we had 3 original plans and they had voted on one that they'd like to see go forwards, and this doesn't seem to match that plan. I guess that's where my thoughts started.
Ryan, why don't you have Bruce do the overall explanation, because Jeff is here at Bruce's and my request to try to address the questions that Ralph raised today and in other times. And we're trying to promote the concept of the design, or the design concept, so to speak, so that we can sort of move forward with some conceptual design, and Bruce can give the particulars and Jeff can supplement that. Because my fear is that if we start to make modifications vis-a-vis those suggestions that you were just making, Ralph, about maybe moving the splash pad or making a larger rec center, I believe those things are modifications that can be made, but we need to get the initial steps done first, and I don't know how they impact the cost. So that's why, for my benefit, and this is a project that I'm very much in favor of, I want Bruce and Jeff to be able to amplify, and certainly Donna. I know everything changes almost monthly in the rec world, but I think it's imperative that we get a basic concept design underway from my perspective. So go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, Ralph, you bring up some obviously good points, but as far as I know, there has been no modifications to the plans based on our December 9th meeting in that presentation. That's what I feel is to be presented here today. And I know Donna has some concerns about the rec center and adding the increased size and things like that. But that can be done under obviously the design phase of the project. And obviously it would may increase the cost of the building itself and the overall project, but until we actually get some sort of funding in order to move the process forward, in meetings, obviously part of the proposal from Berkshire Design Group is to meet with the stakeholders to finalize the conceptual design. Like you said, I can let Donna speak to what she thinks of, I guess, what the Recreation Commission feels they need. But as far as I'm concerned, there's been no conversations with this department in order to obviously modify the plan as it stands today.
Bruce, what's the dollar amount for this request again? 565.
I believe for FY '23 is 495,075.
Okay.
And Ralph, hopefully I answered your question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Rich.
Little confused. That figure that Bruce you just threw out, that represents what?
That's just the bid documents, the design phase. So part of that is design, architectural drawing, and construction estimates.
Okay, but the total project is right now is at 7.3 million. Am I correct?
7.7 million. And that's just obviously building in an escalator based on Jeff's original proposal, November of 2020.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So Jeff, let's assume everything happens, money gets approved. You're awarded the bid for the next steps. What would the next steps be as you would see it?
So it's probably a two-pronged approach. I think, part of what we would need to do to, just carry this all the way through is to do a site survey. So I think that can happen, in a parallel course at the same time that we can work with the town and other stakeholders to, iron out and finalize some of the design concepts. And, as Bruce was saying, we at least for the purposes of this proposal, assumed all those amenities would be located at this park. And so, we can play the shell game a little bit to some extent and, move things around or increase some things, decrease some things. But I think that would be the goal for us during the design piece initially is to, land on a final concept that then we can take through permitting and construction documents.
Perfect. Yeah. So with the money that we're looking to allocate now, we're not picking out furniture, basically.
No.
All right, Ralph.
So what I'm actually saying to the whole committee is I'm concerned that we're going to spend money for a design, a layout, and costs, and this may not be exactly what we want. Wouldn't it be better off to hammer out everything as far as, hey, do we want the basketball courts there or not? I mean, these are yes or no questions basically between our town, the rec committee and stuff. And then say to Jeff, this is, really what we want at this place. I really don't like to spend money to get a design and then not be happy with the design because we haven't filled everything in. Like I said, I mean, we've already spent the 25,000 for the first 3 designs. It's been through the rec. I know the rec voted on other stuff. And then I came to the final design and I went, where'd some of this stuff come from? So I just, like I said, my only opinion, especially with capital money, is that we should know what we want before we ask someone to lay out, give us prices, give us engineering. I know some of the engineering's already been done as far as core samples and stuff like that. We already paid for that to see if there's any ledge or anything like that up there. So, I mean, we're already on the way somewhat, but just my thoughts.
Let me respond to that for a minute. I respect those opinions, Ralph, and they certainly make sense. But I guess my concern would be, how do we ever determine, how do we decide what everybody wants? Because you, for example, might not like basketball courts as part of this and somebody else might. So unless we have some sort of a forum or a vote, which would, I think, drastically delay this yet again, and it's been pending since 2016, and it's vitally necessary for recreation. I guess I think that the modifications, if they are necessary or determined by public sentiment, that's recorded somehow, that we could make those adjustments as we go along, because as Bruce just said, this plan has not been modified so far as we know since the 2016 decision of the rec commission. There's been a lot of conversation, but there's been no design change that anyone has informed me of. And Bruce, I see him on his screen shaking his head, so I think he's agreeing with me. I don't want to spend money needlessly either, but I guess I just want to advocate that unless we move forward on this in some shape or fashion, it's going to be another several years, and that's going to be very disappointing to the community as a whole.
Jeff,
my view.
in your experience, as we move or hopefully move on to the next phase of the project, is that where we would start making those decisions where, you know, the larger aspects of the project, we either would shift and may resize the community center, or, you know, instead of basketball courts, make the pickleball courts, whatever the town decides? Is that the next phase, or is that something we actually have to go back and redo before that?
No, I mean, I think that, I mean, my expectation is that would be the next design phase that we work through, is that, you know, we really need to finalize, you know, a concept to move forward with. So, you know, having those discussions and making sure we know all those elements that we need to include, you know, would certainly be the first step. So I think, you know, that decision-making process certainly would need to be at the forefront of, you know, any further work that we would do.
Donna, this is a question for you. Didn't the Recreation Commission vote on this final concept design and approve it? I thought they did, just to help answer Ralph's question.
Right, there were actually 3 concepts. So I think they just voted to move forward. I don't know if it specifically said whether it was A, B, C, or final concept, since there were 4 drawings, actually.
Jim, I saw you had your hand up, and then Connor.
Yeah, part of what I'm struggling is what is it that we're trying to review and make recommendations for? What is that next step that Mary is alluding to in terms of important to move on? And I guess I'm a little unclear what that part is. And to Ralph's point, I kind of like the idea of making, you know, kind of deciding ahead of time. And if that's part of what that next step design phase is meant to do, I guess I'm pleased to hear that. And I'm not exactly sure, or are we looking at one of the 3 plans, or are we looking at the plan that was adopted, or which concept are we actually looking at?
So my understanding, and Bruce, Mary, Donna, or Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is we're taking that conceptual plan, which was the final plan, not so much regardless of which plan was approved. And now we're gonna, if this is approved, take that plan, refine it down to actual construction documents, actual plans through, you know, meeting with stakeholders and having plans that are ready. So the next phase of the project, when we're done with this phase, would be shovels and getting started.
Just one quick follow-up, Ryan. So the Recreation Department or Commission endorsed this final plan?
They had voted on it, and it's, I think, they would obviously be very involved in the process moving forward with the next phase, should it be approved.
Yeah, and the final concept plan is, and I believe Donna signed off on it, is the November 6, 2020 final concept plan that I believe is part of the submission to the Capital Committee. So that is the final plan.
Connor?
Question is that what we heard? Is that what was presented to us back in January?
In December, yes.
Yeah.
December, excuse me, December. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump.
You skip right over Connor. Go ahead, Connor. You're muted.
Hmm.
You're not muted in Zoom. It looks like you might have the wrong input selected. Or is your microphone hardware muted?
How about now?
There you go.
That's
All right.
better.
Guess I didn't have it plugged in all the way. Maybe more a question for you, Jeff. In your experience with like other communities, do they often do these sorts of projects as one massive project at one time, or do they tend to split things up into various phases?
I mean, more often than not, it's typically a phased project just because of the amount of work. So I think, you know, certainly that'd be part of the process going forward, is to identify, you know, what makes sense in terms of, you know, a phased approach. And, not only from a construction standpoint, but also from a budget standpoint, and how that cash flow would work for the project. So that's certainly not uncommon that we would, hash through that process as we get into it.
And Jeff, to follow up with Ryan's question, so typically if you phase a project out, is it typically more expensive to phase out the project?
There would be some additional costs, yeah, because it would be, multiple mobilizations. It would be, again, I guess if you, the two ways to think about it are just consecutive phases, one after another, which could really be captured as, one larger project and avoid some of the costs. But if it's, phased out over multiple years, there would certainly be, some added cost with, mobilizations and permit pack or construction packages, bid packages.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I would suspect that any contract documents moving forward would allow for amendments or change orders on both sides, so that if the town had an uprising against basketball courts, for example, or for the splash pad, or an opportunity to move those assets or construct them elsewhere, the ongoing nature of the relationship would allow for those amendments.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think, obviously just ideally it would be good to know those, those things earlier on, so that we're not,
Right.
We haven't awarded a contract and then need to have a change order to remove, a significant element of the park. But yes, you're right. We could.
No, I appreciate that very much. I guess my concern is what I was trying to express is that I don't know how we ever get consensus for, because there's always going to be somebody who doesn't think some aspect is necessary or desirable. I'm trying to look at big picture, because as Bruce and I have talked about this many times with Donna, that whole area of the community is ripe for significant development with the upgrading of North Main Street from the Springfield line all the way down to Dearborn, with our rail trail expansion projects. And it all can come together very nicely in the, but we have to take step one. And without that, I'm very of the concerns that are expressed about, the what ifs, but they're never going to go away. And I think that they can continuously delay this project. And I think the Recreation Commission, at least in their representations to me directly, are extraordinarily frustrated that this hasn't happened yet. And I think Donna can assent to that. But anyway, that's about it. I guess I'm just becoming redundant now, so I'll stop.
Rich, and then
I
Connor.
just need clarification. Mary, when you say step one, could you tell me exactly what step one is in the cost?
The step one is the design and engineering
Correct.
amount that Bruce and Jeff were just
you.
describing, that 495, I think you said. And the council or the committee as a whole should be mindful that 113,000 of that was already voted once by the council and then has reverted back to community preservation funds. So the new money, so to speak, is 370 something, but the total is 495, and it would encompass all of the design and engineering, which would include at this point the plan as it was described to you on December 9th.
Thank you very much.
Connor?
Thanks, Ryan. I think overall, I certainly agree with moving the design and engineering phase forward. I think that's a good next step to hammer out some of these details. I think just when it comes to the implementation, that's the only part that I worry about, is the total potential cost of trying to do everything at once, even though it may be a little cheaper to not phase it out. I'm talking from people in the community. There's definitely higher priority things like the fields compared to trying to add on new services that we don't necessarily even offer today. And just judging by all the different capital projects that we have on our backlog here, we haven't necessarily historically done a good job of keeping up. I don't want to see us bite off more than we can chew, so to speak, with adding new things to the community either.
All right, Jim?
So if the next step would be the architectural services, et cetera, that roughly just a shade under 500,000. Do we have a sense as to how much of that could be absorbed by the community preservation funds and how much might have to be, you know, provided by town funds?
Sounds like a great Steve question.
The initial 495, I mean, one of the options we have with the CPC is we can bond, the CPC can bond through us and they pay us back, if you will. I'm working on analysis now that would get the detail. I'll plug in the 495. I think that definitely falls within it. Currently, we're a little over probably $1.5 million, $1.7 million in CPC balance in the undesignated fund balance there. And then some of that split up, but we will get the state share too. The thing to keep in mind with the bonding, it's only on our portion of the CPA. So we can't include the state portion that they match or they send to us, not match, but send to us. It'd be only what we collect from the taxes, on the taxes. So we could fit it in. It'd be some moving parts, I think, but we definitely can do it. We have a lot of capacity within the CPC, but that'd be then the CPCs, you know, have to approve it too. So long drawn out explanation, Jim, but that's kind of where we're at.
Just a quick follow-up, and is the CPC in favor of this concept and moving forward and utilizing funds from their kitties to do it? Do we know?
I've had conversation with the chair, John Torsha, and I believe he's in favor of it. We haven't submitted a formal application through them to have their entire committee look at it, but I think they're all aware of it, certainly. And there are some other financing options available that we can discuss later. But to answer your question, Jim, yes, John wasn't able to make our meeting on December 9th, but he's communicated with me several times since then. His main concern is where the dog park that's currently part of the heritage plan would have to be relocated. He's gotten a lot of commentary, not necessarily all from East Long Meadow residents, but I guess there's quite a few people who use that dog park from other cities and neighboring communities, and they're somewhat distressed over you know, the fact that they might lose that or it gets repositioned or something. But that was the only concern that was expressed, not so much about the whole development itself, but just the particular placement of the dog park.
All right, is there any other questions? Ralph, I knew you had to get one more, right?
I do, and actually this is for Jeff. So Jeff, if we went through the final design and engineering type phase, then under construction, that's usually when it's broken down. If I'm understanding correctly.
So in terms of phases, you mean, or?
Yeah, so in other words, we need to engineer and design and make sure we know exactly what we want and have all the engineering work done.
Right.
And then if we decide to phase it in, it would be on the actual build out. So in other words, there's no way to say, hey, we're going to design the back of it. You know, let's say the 2 fields and put those in. And then the next phase, we're going to design that and put this in. You want to do the whole design and engineering first.
I think it would make sense from, you know, a design and engineering standpoint to do everything at once, just because there's a fair amount of permitting involved. There's a number of other, you know, triggers that, you know, will you know, require some work on our end. And so I think to package all of that up and have a, you know, essentially shovel ready project would be beneficial. At that point, then it can be parsed apart into, you know, separate phases. But I think getting everything designed and permitted and engineered would be, you know, would be a good step as opposed to trying to design and engineer individual pieces of it.
And so I'm assuming for the design phase, sorry, just a follow up for the design phase, you'll have a meeting, bring this, hammer out if there's any little adjustments that the rec department or the DPW wants, and then we'll engineer it based on that.
Right, right.
Probably multiple meetings, I would imagine.
I imagine there would be a number of meetings, right?
Jim?
So this was one question I had at the December meeting when we got together, and I get, it comes back to traffic. I guess North Main Street's a pretty busy street. We got the retail on the other side of it. I guess I'm not exactly sure about parking capacity, traffic flow. And at least at the time of our December 9th meeting, it wasn't clear that we did any studies or looked at, you know, how that might work. So I guess, is that any part of what the due diligence will include in terms of making sure we don't muck up the traffic flow and et cetera?
Yeah, that's not part of Berkshire Designs Group's scope of work. There is obviously a traffic signal that is already there that leaves Heritage Park. And some of that process will be taking place as far as our TIP project is concerned, that whole corridor there. So we're going to have signal improvements and things like that along that corridor. And part of that study as well is going to be some traffic studies. So that will be taken care of on another project, if funding is approved.
And parking capacity, sorry, Connor, I just want to follow up. Would that include the feeling good that we have the right amount of parking spaces for the events that we're going to be?
Well, that's going to be part of Berkshire's responsibility is the parking requirements. So it's, yeah, two separate items.
And also making sure that people actually park in the parking spots. Connor?
Thanks, Ryan. I think another potential when it comes to the traffic thing that we haven't necessarily utilized in the past is through PVPC. They had said that we could get sort of 2 traffic, I don't know if it's full studies, but some sort of data collection for us each year. And I don't think we've typically utilized that thus far.
Yeah, we have not, Connor, but that's a great question.
Rich, I see you were just moving your hand. All right, any other questions for Bruce, Jeff, or Donna? Or anything else that you guys would like to add?
Yeah, I would just ask Donna, I'm not sure when your next rec meeting is, but in order to maybe clarify a little bit, could you ask the commission to make I'll call it a semifinal determination? Are they satisfied with the December 9th, or do they want to recommend at this point a change in any portion of the plan, or they want to would they endorse this moving forward as is with what we've been talking about, so that we can try to clear that up beforehand?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
thanks. I think that'd be helpful.
We have
I'm sorry, one more thing before we go, and to kind of give Ralph some kind of clarity. So typically when we meet with Berkshire Design Group, they're going to give an estimate of probable costs. So they're going to break down each unit and everything else. So we'll have an idea if, if the price tag's way too much, we can look at this, take things out and things like that. So we're going to be able to manipulate some of this so people feel comfortable on what they're paying for. It's not just part of a big giant project with a dollar figure at the bottom. So some of that process will be broken down so we can look at those items.
Yeah, and one other thing, at that December 9th meeting, as I recall, Tom Kay, who's still your chair of your commission, as well as several of the other members of the rec commission were present at that meeting. And I didn't hear, or I don't recall hearing, that there was any objection to what was being presented in terms of the concept. So if they could confirm that for you, and maybe you could report back through Ryan to us or to me directly, it doesn't matter. It'd be good to know. Thank you.
Ralph?
Ryan, just as a point, the reason I ask about phasing in is I know the park grants will allow you to do multiple different years. So if you're doing a project in 3 phases, you can apply 3 different times. And I believe it's up to a $400,000 grant each time. Where if you do the park all at once, you apply for once. So it's just something to think about. I know School Street over in Agawam was able to secure 3 different years of grant funding over there. makes a significant difference. It's all about grabbing in as much grant money as we can, and anything that'll help the cost of this would be great.
Jeff, if we wanted to move forward with a phased construction approach, how would that affect the design phase? Would we just need to let you know? It wouldn't affect it financially?
No, and I think, again, just as I was saying before, I think the only, significant financial impact would be, the construction aspect of it, that, ideally we would design and permit everything so that's ready. And then, there'd be some, a little bit of fee involved in just trying to parse apart, what those phases are, so that those can be, packaged up and bid out separately. But at least all the design and engineering work would be done so that, that lift is a little bit lighter at the end.
Perfect. All right, last call for questions, comments, concerns about Heritage Park. Seeing none, thanks Bruce, Jeff, and Donna. You're welcome to stay for the IT projects if you want. Super exciting.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your
Pleasure
help.
meeting you all, yes.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank
Here, Jeff.
Thanks, Donna.
Take care.
Talk to you later, Bruce.
See ya.
All right. So I think we'll just start at the top with the IT projects, and then I'll give you a brief overview and then field questions from everybody. So the first project at a priority 0, as always, is our one-to-one device replacements. This number is actually a little less than what was on the comprehensive capital plan because we were able to offset some of our devices with grant money. We've been trying to shoot for a 5-year replacement cycle. This $125,000 request is actually about replacing devices that are on the older side. A lot of them that are coming up end of support. So Chromebooks have typically a 6.5-year lifespan, and that lifespan starts from the moment of release of the model. So if you buy a Chromebook that's a 3-year-old model, it's only going to be supported for 3.5 years. So every year what we do is we buy whatever the latest model is and try and make sure that the peripherals are the same. And we've actually lucked out because we switched from HPs to Dells, and a lot of the parts, the internal parts are the same. So keeping parts on hand has been a little bit easier for us instead of having to have HP screens and Dell screens and Acer screens. So if anybody has questions on one-to-one device renewals, we start there. Nothing? Not even from Ralph? Come on, too easy. So the next one is a bigger project. The student information system is the software package that runs basically the whole entire district. It houses all the students, it does all the grades, it prints the report cards, it tracks discipline, it does scheduling. It's the heart and blood of the entire district. The system that we have now was originally designed in a garage from a Longmeadow High School teacher in the 80s. To say that it hasn't really been upgraded would be kind of an understatement. It's they've been designing a new version. We were supposed to be on their new version in 2018, and we still haven't had a demo of it. The staff continues to be frustrated by the inability to do certain things inside of it. Even as recently as Monday, Tuesday, the student data specialist is now an IT employee, and she was on a conference call with their support for about 2.5 hours trying to run a report of the percent of absences that were COVID absences. You think, as anyone that's worked with data before, it should not be something that would be challenging, but it was. Like, she got off the phone and we're sitting here in the office like, how was that a problem? But it was. So does anyone have questions? Jim?
Ryan, are you able to share your spreadsheet on the screen, or? I've got your individual stuff, but I'm having trouble finding the sheet where you have your priorities set.
Hmm.
I apologize.
Oh, not a
I
problem.
am with you, Jim, too. Thank you.
It's gonna make me restart. One second here. I can't.
And the documents that you had sent out to us, they all, at least for me, started with like FY23 IT and then the priority number. And
Yeah.
then the rest of the file name. So I guess.
Let me see how I can do this. Give me a second here. My computer is not set up for permissions to allow it. So I have to allow it. Might just be easier. Let's see here.
I didn't mean to hold up the meeting, Ryan.
All right.
You can go ahead if you want.
Not a problem. Let me just mute this.
When you're ready, I do have a couple of questions
Just
about
gonna
this.
share it from another computer. All right, is everybody still there?
Yep.
Yep.
Don't worry, Jim, I'm getting it for you.
Ryan, do we want to field some questions while we're doing that? Would that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah,
Connor had a couple, I think.
yeah, Connor, go ahead.
All right. So is the cost for this one for actually like getting that new competing product and switching to it?
Yep, so what the plan would be is we would purchase a new product. There would actually be a year of overlap because it's not something that would be like a direct quick replacement. There'd be a lot of work that would have to be done as far as training, migrating the data, making sure the data is accurate. So the plan would be to actually have both systems running for one concurrently for a year. And then the timing of this is for the next school year, we would have two concurrently. And then starting that September, our current maintenance contract expires with our current product.
And so then during so that price too would include like all the data conversion and stuff necessary to the new system.
Yep, the data conversion, the training, everything that would be included. There we go. Is that everybody can see that?
Yep.
Whoa.
And then one more follow-up, if I may.
Sure.
If our current one goes out of support, like during that time window, where like both would be online, would it still be functional, or would we still technically be required to pay for it if the conversion wasn't completely successful by the time that expires?
That's kind of why we're doing the overlap. So we make sure that we have all the data out. We make sure we have all the data that we need from the old system. The old system's not built on any standards based database.
Right.
It's like something that was literally completely homegrown. So a new system would be fully cloud hosted on a standards based system, and we would have that overlap. So hopefully during the summer of, it'd be the 23-24 school year, that would we would be on the new system. So for the 22-23 school year, we would have both systems working concurrently, with the old system still being our primary source of record.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You got it. Steve?
Along the lines of the annual cost. So after that, we kind of talked about it, but so the 129 is for the first year. The annual cost after that would be coming out of the school's budget or your budget?
That would be out of the school's budget. They currently have a budget line item for the existing system. The 129 would cover the concurrent year, so it wouldn't be an additional maintenance other than what they would already have budgeted, as well as this capital project.
Right.
So for the FY24, they would have work in the new maintenance costs, and then it will be down to one.
And based on anything, that's roughly 67,700, almost 68,000 a year,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
And this is worst case scenario. There's actually would be some other cost savings identified. So there's modules that they use outside of the student information system for like job postings and everything that are actually owned by the most likely company that we would go with. So they would actually defray those costs that they're paying now for like their job posting module, since it would be included in this this project. Same system, it just now we're buying other modules from them. Any other questions on the student information system? All right. So the system that we'd be looking to go to as well is also probably like a 75% market share. So they're the big player in the arena. And the one we have now, all their customers are leaving and going to this vendor. Our school.
Ryan, I think the next one's on page 47 of the 60.
Thank you.
It's down there.
47, there we go. Network upgrades. This was a project we had a couple years ago that we didn't spend even nearly the entire, I don't think we spent half of it. We went with a lower cost product, and it turned out that you actually do get what you pay for sometimes. And we had a lot of network issues that we had to work through. We struggled, and we reverted a lot of our switching products back to Cisco, and now we're looking to get the equipment that we have that is end of support, end of life, replacing that. We just, with the emergency funding request, replaced our core network upgrade. So that's kind of the center of our network star. This is to replace the switching equipment in the schools and the town side that is either already end of support or will be end of support by the time this funding would be approved. Not reflected in this price. So this is the full dollar amount request. Not reflected is potential, probable E-rate funding, which would probably shave 75 to 100,000 off of this list, off this amount. this is for every building as well. I can pull up my breakdown. So, does anybody have any questions on the network upgrades before I show you that, Ralph?
So this is actually project priority number 3. Because I see number
Yeah.
2 up at the
I
top.
did
Okay.
two twice, yeah, there's no number 1.
Well, I saw 0 and then 2 and 2, so.
Yeah, and Ryan, I don't have this at all in the package that I received, so the next project I have that's listed as project number 2 was the student information system, and fuel system management is number 3. So can you send that to me?
Yeah.
And also, just as an aside, that core network project that you described, that we use that was free cash, not ARPA, so that we haven't invaded ARPA for any of that. Just so you know, that's still out there. And this 250 is to replace everything that you're describing in that first paragraph.
Yeah, so it's not everything. It's obviously it's not the core network upgrade, and it's also not all of our switches. So a lot of the switches we have in the schools are already upgraded.
Yeah.
This is to replace the rest of them that are not. So, and then these switches run, the access points, our cameras, our door access controllers, all of our phones, and then obviously computers and everything else that goes along with that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks.
Of course.
Hey, Ryan, a follow-up.
Sure.
What is the E-rate funding grant or whatever? What does that stand for?
E-rate, I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's a federal program managed by the FCC that we apply for hardware and internet services for schools. So like 47% of our internet access gets paid for via E-rate, and roughly, it's 50%, but it's not all school related. So it'd be probably like 40 to 45% of this would be reimbursable from, we actually do discounted billing instead of reimbursements, but would be discounted for that.
I just hadn't heard that term before.
Thank you, Ralph. I hadn't either.
Yeah, it's a good amount of equipment, 37 switches. And this is also not just the switches. This replaces the actual, some of the racks that house the switches. A lot of the schools, they are just open racks, and we've had incidents where somebody, a teacher or a staff member, goes and puts a table in there, leans it up, and it breaks the fiber optic to the connection, and we lose the whole switches, which will be a third of a school. This also brings every switch cabinet will have a UPS that will maintain the system for at least 10 minutes in the event of a power outage. Right now, if the power goes out, we lose the switches, and we also lose the phones. I see your hand, Jim.
Yeah, Ryan, I noticed the life is estimated at 7 years. Is that you're comfortable with that? I take it then.
I think so. They'll be supported that long. That's not to say that we wouldn't see requests before that for network upgrades, because we currently have equipment that's in service that isn't replaced with this project that we would then need to replace probably before then. But we're getting at least a good 7 years out of the equipment.
Okay.
And this
much better than the computers themselves then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I just got a new computer for me, and my computer is 9 years old, so.
So that's all hardware, Ryan, right? No software attached to that request?
Correct. Yeah, it's all hardware. All hardware, all in closets that nobody will ever see. Steve? You're muted?
Sorry about that. Just because it's the nature of our world right now. Delivery times. I know we were talking, there was another thing that's been over a year for you is what kind of time frame will we expect on this?
That's a great question. I can't give you an answer, you know. It can be a long time with the microprocessor source shortage. Like as you're alluding to, the access points that we ordered on the town side on July 14th are estimated to be delivered on July 20th, over a year later. And you know, that's still optimistic. I think they're just throwing a number on there just to try and appease me. So yeah. Let's see.
As a follow-up, what impact on the cost would that be? I know you can't predict the future, but I'm saying just in general, is that the quote we have for this 261?
That includes
generally expire in 30 days. So
yeah, that includes the contingency.
okay.
So all the projects I had a contingency just purely because of that. You know, it can be like the grant we had for the server upgrade, the Nutanix. Those quotes were good for 7 days. So every 7 days I had to reach out to the guy because he had to renew the quote in order to keep that pricing. So every 7 days we had to renew it until we had the grant signed and everything. It's the same thing with this. That's why we've had the contingency built into it. You know, and if you know we don't have enough money, you'd have to come back and get more. But I don't think it would be a considerable amount.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? Connor, I don't see you on my screen, so if you have a question, just go ahead and ask it.
No questions on this one.
And Rich, there you go. See if I get a different grid here. There we go. There's everybody. All right, we'll go on to the next project. Fuel management system. I added another extra system in there. It's kind of self-explanatory. This is the system that we use as well as LPVEC in their vehicles to track our vehicle fueling. Any town department that has a vehicle that needs fuel uses this system. It's horrible. It does not work with our swipe cards anymore. The fuel keys are failing, the pedestals are failing. We actually have to keep a separate computer just to access this software because it only works on a very old version of Internet Explorer. So that alone is just a security risk. It's time to replace it. It's $40,000. That's for, oh, and also the vendor that supports it is no longer in business, and there's no one that supports it locally. We would be changing vendors to a different product that is managed by or supported by a local company. You know, and obviously as part of the project scope, we would make sure it works with our swipe cards so we can track users accurately instead of like what we had previously where everybody used the same code and you can't distinguish what fuel is going into what vehicle and who's doing the fueling. Any questions on the fuel management system, Ralph?
So Ryan, I'm assuming by tracking it, then we're able to put the costs into different departments, whether it be the police or the fire or the school or whoever uses it. That's the main function of this software, I'm assuming.
Yep, exactly. So we have every person has a tag and every vehicle has a tag. Ideally, the system should be, if I have a fire vehicle and I fuel it, you can see that fuel went into that fire vehicle, but you can also see that IT fueled it and then it would be billed to IT. It's kind of, yeah, so every user is identified, every vehicle is identified separately. So you have two different systems where right now we can't add users anymore. So we have to revert to actual codes, which, you know, when it's something people know instead of something people have, it's a lot easier for people to share it. And now everyone shows up as, you know, generic user with a code.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Any questions on our fuel system management system? And then again, there's a contingency built into this price, just because You know, who knows what the price of things are going to be when we get funding for it. So next is a project we've seen for a few years now. The building automation upgrades in the past. We've kind of not had as high of a priority because when the existing system was becoming end of life, our vendor let us know, and Public Works had the funding to purchase enough spares to carry us through. Those spares are obviously being used in replacing failing equipment, and we're running out of spares, and replacements for the hardware that we have is getting a lot harder to find. This would be to upgrade our existing systems in all of the buildings up to the newer supported system, and changing kind of like the whole management front end as well. Questions on the building automation upgrades?
And sorry to be ignorant, Jim. This is controls at each building to what, control temperature and HVAC and those kinds of things?
Yep. So this is all the HVAC controls for all the buildings. It does all the air handlers. It does the CO sensors in the schools. It does controls exhaust fans. Basically any type of environmental control gets run through this system. It has night setbacks and that type of thing. Manages it all through there. It also helps a lot with diagnosing problems for Public Works, where if they can see the different sensor feedback and be able to identify, okay, well, based on the discharge and return temps, you can tell if a belt's falling off of something. They have freeze stats in the unit, so if it's too hot or too cold, it can open up the heating valves, that type of thing.
Thank you.
You got it. It's a little more advanced than a Nest thermostat, just a little. All right, next up is the permitting system replacement. So this project has also been on the docket for a few years. Our current electronic permitting system is done inside of Munis, our main ERP system. Munis has tombstone this product. They are supporting it, but they're no longer developing it and growing it. They had purchased a company that does electronic permitting, and they want to shift everybody to that system. Our thought is we're going to shift to a different system. Agawam went through a demo process for quite a few vendors, and they were really happy with this product. Not to say we would go with this one. It's just something that I thought looked good and gave us a dollar amount for quoting purposes. Also, this can be funded through the casino money, that casino grant that Karen got. This would be the electronic portal for permitting and licensing for businesses as part of that whole project.
And that grant was for 100,000, so a portion of it was to get a consultant to devise this, so maybe this will substitute for that. And then the upgrade of the website to make that functionality readily available. So we have 100,000 that will be distributed in parceled out, so to speak. The grant was very specific about how they would fund these things, but the sum amount was 100,000 that we've been granted. So that's very good news.
Very good news. Jim?
So would that change the recommended source of funding?
Yes. Yep. So this was submitted before that grant was awarded.
And yes, I agree. Good news.
Steve?
With the Munis aspect of it, this I assume will talk to Munis, because in Springfield we used Excel and it didn't.
That's a good question. It's probably will. I can't go ahead and say that it's going to. Because like we had talked about earlier, they're always going to tell you it does,
Yeah.
but if it actually does is a different story. There might have to be some sort of a manual translation that has to be done, but we'll obviously do whatever we can to make it work with it.
Yep.
Questions
So-
on Ralph?
So Ryan, currently everything, building permits and all are in Munis. So if we get any new software, I mean, don't they have to speak to each other? Don't you have to look at, past permitting? And I'm concerned about keeping a record of permits, keeping it in the database so that you can pull stuff up and look at it. And my other question, it's probably off the deep end a little bit. Are we going to be keeping Munis, or are we going to in the future be looking for other software? Do we know?
I can't see us moving away from Munis to some degree, at least for the financial side of it, and payroll side of it. It's, Munis is the product that does everything okay. To be able to break it up and to move away from it, you'd be looking at a dozen different software packages that would then have to be managed. Right now, we're managing, 60 large software products. What was the first part of your question? Oh, so we probably wouldn't get rid of the Munis module for permitting because I think it's like $2,300 a year it costs us for support and maintenance of it. And it's a locally installed system, so we already have the database and everything is under our control already. But for historical, the best solution that I would strive for would be to take our existing data and information and move it into the new system, so you could have it as a single pane of glass instead of having, you have to go back to the old system for historical, and then it's on the new system for the new stuff. So I think I got all your questions.
Yeah, that's something Ryan and I have discussed over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, ever since we escaped from the ADP
Right.
contract. There are other vendors there. Ryan makes a good point that, Munis hasn't been supported very well from what he tells me on certain instances over the last year. So that kind of initiated the thought of maybe going to a Harper's, or there's a couple of other vendors, but we have so many different idiosyncrasies, let's say, in town in terms of scheduling and whatnot, that I think there's a comfort level with Munis. With all its warts, it's still something that the IT department is comfortable with. Not to say that they wouldn't like to see some improvements too, but I think for the foreseeable future, we're probably going to stick with them, Ralph.
Okay.
Unless we really want to take a deep dive and try something new, but that would be a tall order. I mean, we'd need to do a better job preparing the town for that than was done when we ventured into ADP, because I think part of the reason that didn't work is that we just the support internally wasn't there. The preparation wasn't done in advance, so that would be a big project.
So
And then-
it was actually raised in our IT director's email group as recently as a few weeks ago, looking for alternatives. It was actually the city of Westfield was looking who is not using Munis in Massachusetts, and it's pretty much anyone with a population more than 6,000, or let's just say a population that has an IT department is using Munis. Wilbraham does not use it. The product that they use had been purchased by another main software vendor and is like not very well supported. So there's really not a lot of alternatives that can do the municipal finance side of things. I don't know, Steve, if you heard. Differences.
Yeah, the Munis, I've dealt with some form of shape with Munis since 2008. I agree with Mary and Ryan. The implementation and support sometimes can be difficult, we'll say. That being said, right now their market share, I believe, is the majority of the state anyways, and they're expanding. At one point we had South Dakota come into Springfield to see how we liked it. They're growing, which might be causes some of the support thing, but right now you're gonna have a hard time finding someone our product that does what it does right now, what we have it do right now, as one product. And I also think that a lot of the auditors and ratings, people reviewing this stuff, they're all used to Munis now, and it would cause more of a
Yep.
obstacle to them than to not.
Yeah.
So I guess my question with this is, if this is already pre-done through funding, through MGM, through the grant and all, do we need to approve it as a capital project and paid by that grant? I thought that was the whole reason to get the grant, was to do
Yeah.
this.
I don't think you need to evaluate it through this committee, because that's what the
Yeah.
money is for
Exactly.
specifically, so.
All right, that's all of IT's capital projects. Any questions on any of the projects? Anything you'd like to know more about?
Ryan, this is Jim. I would just like to piggyback on Mary's request to send that package that we were
Yeah.
looking at, because I see the individual ones, but I'm not sure I got it in the form of this big overall document. So
Yeah,
If
it
you-
was in the first email with all the Heritage Park things, so probably got buried in that.
more than likely.
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now.
Thanks.
You got it? And I'll send you just that project, not just that email. Any other questions? Mary, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have one. I just want to make sure, Ralph in particular, and anybody else on the committee, is there anything else regarding the Heritage Park business that you want specific follow-up on that would help you? Or do you feel like with what I've asked Donna to do and Jeff Silver's comments today, are you satisfied, or do you want more specifics that we can work on in between?
So actually, Mary, I'm planning on going to the rec commission meeting when they talk about it. And that way there I can listen, hear what they have to say. The problem is you miss a few of the meetings, and the first time they voted on this, the next time they voted on that, then they wanted to add this. And I don't know if I caught the last meetings. The last time I had talked to Tom Kay, they had voted on a plan quite a while ago, but not this updated plan. So I just want to make sure that, hey, if the rec commission needs something, or they feel something's really important to go in there, that the town makes sure that it gets in there for the 7.5 million.
Oh, understood. I just, I don't want to leave any loose ends if we can identify what they are in advance and help you.
Absolutely. I think it's important to realize that we had the 4 plans that were submitted, but those are by no means the finalized plans. There's a lot of room to shift things, a lot of room to come up with the final design, and have a lot of meetings with between the rec commission and hopefully whatever vendor we choose would reach out to the surrounding neighborhood area and get their input as well. Jim?
Yeah, and in response to Mary's question, I just think it'll be important. I think you were taking the steps to do that all of the entities that have to work on this or fund this are on the same page, so that the rec commission is saying, yes, this is what we want. The CPC is saying, yes, we like this, and we're gonna move forward with it, so that we're all coming from the same spot.
Definitely. And I don't know, Connor, if you had any recollection of anything in particular that happened through the master plan development with the visioning sessions. I seem to recall a great deal of support for this heritage project, but I don't have those documents in front of me right now. But I think that's a good point, Jim. And Connor, do you have any recollection?
Not off the top of my head, but I know there was just a lot of interest, mostly in the rail trail, trying to connect it to
Sure.
parts of Heritage Park. So however that could happen as well.
All right, well, we'll take those steps, Jim, by all means.
So for our next meeting, do we want to do site visits? Would have been perfect to take care of all of them yesterday with the weather.
Can we make sure it's going to be in the 60s?
I'll put the request in. So if we look at, we could do next Thursday. We have, where's my sheet?
That's the third, Ryan.
That is the third, yes. To do a site visits at Public Works, Police and Fire.
I'm available after 11:15 again,
You're good after 11:15 on Thursday?
and wide open Wednesday, if that helps.
Yeah, on Thursdays, I always have meetings usually from like 1 to 3 p.m. So I wouldn't have much time.
How are you on
between
Wednesday?
Let's see.
So just to point out, long range outlook is 42 on Wednesday, 34 on Thursday,
Good work, Ralph.
Just saying, Ralph, right? Yeah.
51 on Saturday, but
I don't think
I
anyone
could do
wants
Wednesday.
site visits on a Saturday. Any objections to Wednesday at 10?
That might be a problem for me and for the police chief, where they're interviewing some candidates for appointment, and the dates and times have yet to be determined, but that's one of the options. But maybe earlier, maybe like 9 on Wednesday, if people can do that instead of waiting till later.
I'm good for 9.
9 works for me.
I could do
I'm good
that.
for 9.
I'm good.
'Cause we've got other things Wednesday midday too that are
Right.
a problem.
And I'll just have to add my caveat, and the same reason I bowed out yesterday is I don't know where I'll be in terms of being able to stand for any, length of time. So if I can't make it, I'll obviously defer to the august body that will be there in person.
Yeah.
Just drive
And
around the
when-
building, Jim.
Yeah. I gotta be able to drive first, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I'll get those scheduled for 9 on a Wednesday for Public Works, Fire and Police. And then we also have Heritage Park on our site visit list I have here. Do we want to look at that for the following week? Do we want to walk it and try and visualize it? What's the committee's thought?
So truthfully, if we're gonna be getting 5 to 9 inches of snow,
Mm.
we're probably not gonna be walking it next Wednesday.
Probably not.
I think let's just wait, see where we're at, and maybe the following week, like I said, depends on what it looks like, and whatever we do, if we're gonna walk it, you're gonna have to wear boots. It's
Yeah.
wet.
And you don't really need me, Ryan, because that Wednesday's not looking good for me as I look at my calendar. Even at
second?
9. Yeah, it's not.
Filling up quick.
But don't let me interfere with, if it's convenient for everyone else, go for it.
Where do we start our tour, Ryan, on the 2nd?
We'll meet at Public Works, and let's meet at the police department, and we'll work back the other way, back towards the center. This way we can get out of Mark's hair before he has that potential interview.
And Jim, do you want me to give you a call? Like, I can pick you up if you feel like you can do it. Give you a call the
Sure.
night before?
Sure, Rich. Hopefully maybe another week will make me feel a little bit more able to do that. Thank you.
I'll call you Tuesday night.
Thanks.
All right, any other business for the committee? Other than that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing
I like to
none.
talk about it.
All those in favor, Ralph?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Rich?
You bet.
Connor?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Steve?
Sure.
Mary? And second, Ryan is a yes. All right, motion is adjourned, meeting is adjourned at 11:20. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Ryan.
Hey, everyone.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.